I threw my parents' favorite line back in their faces during an argument, and it embarrassed them. I'm 31 now, but looking back, my childhood was a never-ending string of being overlooked. Being the middle child meant I was always caught in the shadows of my two brothers. Our family dynamic made it clear that I didn't matter as much. My older brother, 34, and my younger brother, 28, were always the center of attention. I was just there, always left to fend for myself. You know how some families have that one child they dote on endlessly? My older brother was their golden boy, and my younger brother, well, he was the baby. As for me, I was the girl they didn't seem to want, the one who always had to hear, "Your brothers need us more right now." It wasn't that my brothers had special needs or anything, they were just demanding, and my parents gave in to their every whim. I learned early on that my needs weren't going to be a priority. Anytime I asked for anything, even just a bit of attention, it was met with exasperation and that same old line, "You need to understand, your brothers come first." The smallest things always highlighted the imbalance. When my older brother turned 16, he was handed the keys to a brand new car. It was this shiny red sports car, and the pride on my parents' faces when they gave it to him was blinding. A couple of years later, the same thing happened when my younger brother reached that age. Another new car, this time blue, and the same celebration. When I turned 16, though, my parents barely even acknowledged it. There was no car, no celebration. Instead, they handed me an old, rusty bike they'd found at a garage sale and said, "If you can fix it up, you can have it." I tried to make the best of it, but after hours of hard work, they ended up giving it to my younger brother. That was the final straw. Birthdays were no better. For my brothers, birthdays were a big deal. Parties, presents, and all the attention in the world. For me, they were just another day. I remember one birthday in particular. I had saved up for months to get myself a little cake because I knew no one else would. I came home that day, cake in hand, only to find out my parents had planned a surprise dinner for my younger brother, even though it wasn't his birthday. Christmases were just as predictable. Every year, my brother's piles of presents would dwarf mine. They'd get the latest gadgets, brand name clothes, and whatever else they'd put on their lists. I'd get something small, usually practical and always an afterthought. But even more hurtful than the lack of gifts was the lack of effort. It was clear that they didn't see me the way they saw my brothers. It wasn't just about material things, though. It was the emotional neglect that cut the deepest. There were countless school events, performances, and achievements of mine that went unnoticed, while my parents would drop everything to attend anything my brothers were involved in. I remember once getting first place in a local art competition. I was so proud and excited to tell my parents. When I did, all they said was, "That's nice, but your brother has a football game tonight, so we'll need you to come along to support him." It wasn't that I didn't love my brothers, but their entitlement was infuriating. They knew they were favored, and they didn't hesitate to rub it in. I was always expected to sacrifice for them, to make space for their needs, but no one ever made space for me. It was exhausting, and I felt invisible. Then, a few years ago, during a particularly heated argument with my parents, I finally snapped. They were scolding me for not showing up to one of my brother's events, and I couldn't take it anymore. I threw their favorite line back at them, "You need to understand, my needs come first right now." The look on their faces was priceless. It was like they had never considered that I had needs of my own. For the first time, they seemed embarrassed, and maybe even humiliated. I didn't back down either. I went on listing all the times I'd been ignored, overlooked, and pushed aside for the sake of my brothers. I told them how it felt to be the forgotten child, the one who always had to come second, or third, really. That argument changed things. My parents didn't apologize right away, but there was a shift. Slowly, they began to realize that they had been unfair. They tried to make up for it in small ways, inviting me out more, asking about my life, making an effort to include me in things. But by then, the damage was done. I've since moved on and built a life for myself, one where I'm not the afterthought anymore. I have friends who value me for who I am, and I've learned to stand up for myself. My relationship with my parents is better now, but it's far from perfect. They still dote on my brothers, but I've made peace with it. I no longer seek their validation because I know my worth.